Hey guys, welcome to the We Need to Calm Down podcast. I'm Devin,
And I'm Joe.
and this is the show where we talk about all things Taylor Swift.
That's right. This is the show where two friends finally get to let their dedication to the six-time 2021 Grammy nominee Taylor Swift fly.
We'll be discussing everything from song breakdowns, Taylor news, and our insane fan theories.
That is right. But this week is an episode long time coming. But before we get into that, we want to discuss there's a lot of news happening with Taylor right now. So we have like three pieces of mildly big, like not big enough for an episode, but like big enough that we'd be remiss if we didn't mention it.
Like Tay updates, Tay
Tay,
news.
we got to come up with a snappier
I
name for it.
know.
We will. In the future, we will have a snappier name for the news segment of this podcast. But so number
Swift
one,
news.
is that a thing?
Well, no, but just it's Swift, like
Oh, because it's quick
like
and it's
quick news.
I like that.
Swift
I like
news.
that we're doing our, like, our
Brainstorming.
company meetings on podcast time.
Yes. Okay. So Swift news.
Swift news. We have number one. I don't know if you remember a while back, the theme park, Evermore.
So what state was that in? I don't even
I think
remember.
it's in Utah. I
Like
want to say it's in
yeah.
Utah.
Some irrelevant theme park that no one's really heard of until this suit comes into play.
I will
Sues
say,
Taylor Swift.
as a big nerd, I did hear about it through, like, I think there's like a BuzzFeed article like a couple of years ago about like D&D or like just Elder Scrolls Skyrim style questing thing, and I was like, oh, that looks pretty cool. But they're called
Evermore theme park.
And they sued. And I will say this, as someone who like did a lot of research for this podcast and coming up with a name and stuff like that, making sure that we don't infringe on any trademarks or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I found, I'm not a lawyer by any means, but as long as you aren't in competing competing businesses, you can use the same name.
Well, yeah, because it's two entirely different. It's an album, a musical album, and then an amusement park.
An amusement park. There couldn't be more different. And the story ends up going that they sued Taylor for the name, specifically for a couple of reasons. Number one being that they stole the name. Number two being that they bumped their SEO in Google's search results down, which, like, that just means if you come up with a name, if you can get your Google search results removed, you can get sued. Ridiculous. I think that's the definition of the term baseless.
Oh, yeah, baseless is exactly what Taylor's team called it. I'm trying to
Mhm.
find the exact songs. Here we go. Okay. So, for this baseless and frivolous lawsuit that they're saying, they go, you know what? In true Taylor fashion, we're going to countersue you because the park was using some of Taylor's songs without her permission, including Love Story, You Belong With Me, and Bad Blood.
It's so fascinating to me too, because, like, again, this is a fantasy themed park. Why is Taylor Swift playing? Like, you feel like you'd only hear like lutes and like old time music from like the middle, like the mid-century or whatever.
Because,
Like,
baby,
why
we got bad blood.
I just feel like you're like fighting a dragon or something on a quest in this place, and
Which
suddenly
is
Kendrick
so
Lamar starts rapping at you.
it's so funny too because this lawsuit came, I don't know what time in 2019, but for Evermore it came, I guess, December of 2020 when the album was released. This suit for the infringement on her songs started in 2019. BMI reached out and was like, hey,
Yep.
you know, you can't do this, you don't have permission to do this, and they couldn't reach them. But now that everything's up in the public, it's like, oh, hey, you're gonna sue us. Funny enough, boom.
Also, I think it came out that the owner of the park was like owed a construction company like millions of dollars
Of
that they
course.
couldn't pay because of COVID and everything like that, which is sad, like
Yeah.
all that stuff. But like, it's less sad when they realize, oh, how can we make those millions of dollars? Just sue a very successful recording artist.
Yeah.
So that's piece of news number one. Piece of news number two is Gasoline Remix by Haim came out.
Yes, with Taylor Swift. Unfortunately, or fortunately, not just doing background vocals. She has a whole verse dedicated to
That's
her.
that was like the running joke that Haim was gonna get her back and Taylor was only gonna sing "She Did It" in the background of this song.
Just little background vocals. Oh, no, but she shines on this song. There's a couple really good points. I know that I liked it right away. I don't think that you did.
I actually hated this song right away. It was not my vibe. I've described it to a friend. I said like it's a very West Coast music vibe,
Mm,
at least in my opinion. It reminds me very much of like a Lana Del Rey, very like swayy and like beachy. And I was like, if I'm on the beach, sure, but like I'm not on the beach. I'm like very sad in my house. So I was like, so I wasn't really feeling it. And then just over time, I just started listening to it more and more and found it caught in my head. And it's one of my favorite songs at this current moment.
I love that Taylor thought when they talk about having her on the album, Haim said that Taylor thinks Gasoline was like the best song on the album, and that's why they invited her to be on this remix of it. And you think about the nature of the song. This song is very, I mean, I don't know,
Sexual.
yeah, very sexual. I'm like,
Hmm.
damn, all right, Taylor, false god over here. Just
I didn't realize it too, because that's the other thing about this song is like the lyrics feel like an afterthought to
mm,
me when I'm listening to it. Like to me, it's just a vibe. Like I'm listening to this song and I'm just vibing. I'm not
yeah.
really paying attention to what they're saying. And then when I started to pay attention to what they're saying, I'm like, wait a minute, Taylor curses in this song?
Mhm.
Like I didn't realize that until I literally looked up the lyrics. And then like I looked up the lyrics and I read like breakdowns of it. And I'm like, that's what this song is about?
Little
Okay.
saucy Swift over here.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I never thought of it like that. It doesn't make it bad, doesn't make it good.
Hmm.
I still like it, still a vibe, still throw it on when I'm like looking to chill or relax or something. A very relaxing
Yeah.
song. I think it is interesting. Like Taylor is one of those artists that no matter what she puts out herself, I will like it on the first listen.
Hmm.
I think. I like there are a lot of artists that put out songs that I'm like it takes me a little bit to end up liking it, and I might have said that when I first started listening to this song,
Hmm.
but Taylor and I think Halsey is the only other two artists that like first listen I'll like what I put out.
Interesting. So that is Swift News number two. Number three piece of information that we recently got as of yesterday, actually, on
Mhm.
Friday, the 26th, is that unfortunately, I guess she's canceling her Lover tour. I
Yeah.
had this discussion with my friend because it doesn't say outright that all tickets will be refunded and that the show is like officially canceled. It just says that at this time we are unable to reschedule.
I think that's like the PR way of saying it's
Hmm.
canceled, but because you don't want to use negative terminology.
Yeah.
And she did mention like refunds have been available for a while
Hmm.
now.
Yeah.
And if you were holding on, like people were holding on to tickets just hoping that it
Hmm.
would get rescheduled. And like I have a concert coming up that I think is going to get canceled in general, which really sucks. But I think that's where she's at. As someone who didn't have tickets to this, I'm not too upset.
Yeah.
But it still sucks that like it's weird because now Lover lives in this realm where it didn't get a full concert. And granted, it's also still weird. Like Loverfest is like an interesting, and by interesting I mean very weird situation because we still don't know what that would have been.
Hmm.
Like she gave us so little information on what to expect from Loverfest. Like we didn't even know if that was even a concert. Like she never came said like, yeah, we're gonna do a concert. I'm gonna perform a concert. It was just like, no, this is a festival
Yeah. I think it was going to
celebrating
be
Taylor.
a day-long festival, probably with some other things than just music, like experience-based things. But
Which I think would be cool. I'm not saying it, but like I trust Taylor. I'm not saying that she was like trying to dupe a bunch of people, but like it's still just weird. Not only did we know so little about what this experience was going to be, in a way, I don't think we'll ever know unless it comes out another documentary or something.
yeah, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think
I
that
agree.
for people who are anticipating going, hurting would just know hurt or knowing would just hurt a little bit more.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's going to make whatever concert she comes up with next is going to be I can't even fathom. Like I can't
Hmm.
even think of what she would end up coming up with. So I don't know. It sucks for ticket holders and like that's very upsetting, especially if you were really holding out hope. But I mean, it makes sense with where we're at. We're just not in a place where we're going to be able to do a concert of that magnitude in a really long time.
Yeah. So that is all of our Swift news. So what are we talking about on today's typical Tuesday episode?
This is a long time coming. We have actually been planning to do this episode for weeks, I think, but we just kept pushing it back because of other episodes coming up. But we have finally put together our definitive rankings for Evermore, and we actually added a bunch to this episode. If you are if you've been following us for a while, you know that generally we will do a power rankings every week for the first 4 weeks that a new album comes out, and then about we try to let like marinate in the new album and really let it sink in, and then we will do an episode that depicts exactly where we think all of the songs rank on our personal scales. This one is an odd episode in that genre just because we have a whole era, like sister album era here.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to, in addition to going through our final rankings and running down the same let's say run of show that we did for the folklore episode, we combined at the end uh our rankings for both Folklore and Evermore, so we can see definitively what songs we like better from each album, if there's anything interesting we can pull out of that. So why don't we just go into it and just start with talking about our new list? Like, what do we have, any big movers and shakers? Has anything changed from the last rankings that we put out?
It's so interesting because I feel like this album was very consistent.
Mm-hmm.
There was a good amount of fluctuations, which we'll get into a little bit later. But for the most part, mine stayed pretty much the same.
It's interesting for me. Like, there are like one or two songs that really jumped up and down, but most of my fluctuations were within three
Mm-hmm.
of each other. Like, nothing really went from like 11 to 2 or anything like we saw in Folklore. But the thing that I think is the most interesting is this is the first album, and granted, we've only been doing this exact thing for 2 albums now, but this is the first album where I've had a clear number one that has not wavered, has not changed for the entire duration of since release to now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's real, considering someone like me on the last one, I gave so many flux. I I changed my opinion every week
Mm-hmm.
dramatically on Folklore. And this album, I still change my opinion a decent amount, but to have one that I had zero fluctuations for my number one song. And that's insane to me.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's pretty much the same. I think that for my number one as well, I didn't really have any fluctuations, I want to say.
I don't think so either.
Nah,
Not
no
unless it changed at the
fluctuations.
end.
No. So the really interesting thing for me was that for some songs, I gave a lot of flux, but they ended up in the exact same, if not one place off. Like, for instance, Champagne Problems. I won't reveal where it is yet, but I had it changed 15 times and it ended up just
Wow.
one space away from where it was initially. And
That's so
then
funny.
what's Tolerated had 12 flux, ended up the exact same spot. Yeah, so what was it? 7 songs ended up the exact same ranking out of the 17, and then 5 ended up within 3 places of the original ranking. So I guess that
That's
means trust your
crazy.
instincts from the first time around. That
My
might,
I don't have any of that.
that might be for me just gaining an appreciation of the other song. So you listen to it, wow, this is my opinion, and then you say, okay, well, I'm gonna delve into it, and I'm gonna go through the motions of this song is now my favorite at the moment. This song is now my favorite at the moment. But when you look back on a cohesive album, this ranking is pretty much the same as it was in the beginning, which I find very interesting.
I love that too because like when we were ranking these albums for or these songs for the first time, it's always a nightmare
Mm-hmm.
because like especially this album, and we've mentioned it a lot with this album, where like the quality of song on this album is so hard to differentiate between the songs. Like we think there are definitely some songs that rise to the top, but the rest of the songs are just like so close that it's just very hard to differentiate where they should go in a
Mm-hmm.
ranking. And we had this we said the same thing with Folklore too. Like I remember you saying with Folklore the sticky notes that you had, you were just like, all of these are four.
They're just all
all
the same line. Yes. I feel like overall this album is very solid. Like there's a good amount of standouts, but like you said, the quality you just can't place one over the other. It's like they're just
Mhm.
equal for different reasons.
For me, I think like a couple of things that stood out was Ivy was impossible for me to place.
Mm-hmm.
It started really low, it shot up, it went back down low, it shot back up. Like it moved all over my rankings for 5 weeks before ending right about where it
Mm-hmm.
started, which is interesting. And it still feels wrong. That's the other thing. It's like going through this. Like we were up really late last night, talking through this, trying to figure this out, re-listening to the albums, getting everything ready, and it's still like we still don't feel like we still feel like this is our definitive ranking show, but like it's just so hard with this album.
Mm-hmm. It'll change again in
But
the future.
it's gonna change. Like it's just so hard because like all of these songs being of top quality, it's literally how are you in that mood. I
Mm-hmm.
Because like we were listening to I was listening personally, there's a Spotify playlist that just puts all of them, all 34 songs together, and my favorite song is the one I was listening to at that moment. Like that's just how it was.
Yeah.
Like I even songs that I ranked very low, I was like, oh yeah, this song is so good, like I
Mm-hmm.
really like this one part or blah blah blah. Like I said, I didn't have a lot of groundbreaking shifts. The biggest drop from favorite to okay was No Body No Crime. That one fell like a rock.
Yep. Same.
But the biggest upward shift I think was Cowboy Like Me, which still started just outside my top 5, but like it stayed pretty consistent after it shot up. But I do remember like when I first heard that song, it was very much I could probably skip this song, and then I listened to kind of like Gasoline. I listened
Mm-hmm.
to it again, and I was like, but wait, there's a vibe here, and I like what she's putting down on this one.
Yeah. I think some of my big shakers included Tolerate It, Champagne Problems, where it either started low or high, did an inverse because I was appreciating other songs, and then ended pretty much back in the same spot it started off in. The only
Champagne.
one, yeah, the
Sorry,
only
go ahead.
one that had the same thing was just Nobody, No Crime for me.
It. I think Nobody No Crime had Betty syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Like we if you listen to our episode on Folklore or like follow us on social media, like I mentioned a thing about Betty that like it's very much like ice cream. And like I think my exact thing was in Peace was like a steak dinner. Like it was very complex. There are a lot of different parts and you had to take your time to enjoy it. And Betty is like ice cream where it's very sweet, it's very easy. You know you like it on the first try. It's
Mm-hmm.
delicious. You want it, you crave it, blah blah blah. But I will say for No Body No Crime, I think it has less intricate lyrics than Betty. Like, don't get me wrong, both songs are absolute bops, but I still think about Betty. Right now, like the last time right now is the last time I can think of I could dream about what happens when you see my face again.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a lyric that just pops into my head occasionally and I can't get over it. I don't
Yeah.
think there are any lyrics in No Body No Crime that I'm drawn to like that.
I think the big appeal with Nobody, No Crime is its just concept, the
Hmm.
song's concept in general, being true crime related, having a friend in it, Haim's in it. I think that's really the appeal of it. Whereas Betty was just somewhat lyrical, also enjoyable and easy to listen to. Nobody No Crime is the fun song to listen to when it comes on, but I
Hmm.
no longer seek it out just to listen to it. But if I'm in that mood, then that's the perfect song you go for.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Betty was like it was that like bop song that you in a good mood you could listen to, but you could also cry to it because you can
Mhm.
relate to the story that's being told. You can't really relate to the hopefully you can't really relate to the story in Nobody No Crime.
No.
Um, but yeah, those that's like my biggest fluctuation
Mhm.
and my biggest like change going through.
Well, let's keep talking about Flux then. So, how many Flux did you give about this album?
So this is something that we came up with in our first like definitive rankings episode, where I went through and I tracked. I like I said, we did a power rankings of every 4 weeks. I think it ended at five
Mhm.
different power rankings throughout us listening to this album. And I was curious about how many times we changed our opinions on each song. And I named them fluctuations, and then as a joke, I named them flux. So the amount of flux given for me on this episode or on this album for the entirety of every song is 135. So I changed my opinion different spots 135 times.
Yeah, so I did the same thing, but only 109 times, which is still over the 100 mark. But overall, we gave less flux than we did about folklore. Our opinions changed a lot more with that album, or a good amount more.
I think for me in folklore I fluxed 147 times and you
Okay.
fluxed 107.
All
So
right.
so we're staying consistent in that I
Mm-hmm.
am way more indecisive than you are, or you just have a better ear and know what you like quicker than I do. But we definitely like seem to hone in a little bit more on this album than we did on folklore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that stands to exactly what we said, where this album just overall the quality is just easier to, it's harder to move, so we just didn't move them as much.
Yeah. So you give 26 more flux than me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, our top number one songs did not change at all. So go us for being decisive about something.
I'm so proud of that.
And that's pretty much it when it comes to flux. So if you
Yeah.
want, we can move on to actually how our rankings for Evermore ended up.
All right, so now we're going to get into the part where we talk about how our friends and Reddit ranked Evermore. So we did this in folklore as well. We went through and surveyed as many people who would take our text messages and would talk to us about Evermore. Interestingly enough, it was less people than who would talk to us about folklore. We surveyed 21 of our friends. Like I said, we had less people rank these songs than we did folklore. And I noticed something with my friends specifically. I don't know if you noticed the same thing, but a lot of my friends that aren't huge Swifties were like texting me a lot about folklore, like very into it, very ready to like give me a top five and everything. And that feels like they either hit like a fatigue of Taylor or something, where like they just didn't care about Evermore nearly as much as they did about folklore. Did you see that too?
100%. So even people who were Swifties, like the people who ended up favoring Folklore to Evermore, I'll shout out my friend Stefan here because she watches it and comments out loud about this podcast, which I love. She was saying, I think Folklore is better because just the cultural impact of her surprise dropping an
Mhm.
album that is not in her genre whatsoever. So Evermore still wasn't expected, but it's something that we've heard before.
I
Like
agree. I
we've
can
heard
see that.
similar themes from Folklore on Evermore, so that way, and she still loves Evermore, but it's just that now Folklore was like the bigger punch.
It's like folklore was the earthquake and Evermore was the aftershock.
Yes,
Like
that's
it,
a
it
great way to put
the
it.
aftershock is still damaging and can still hurt, but the earthquake is the thing that really came out of nowhere and started the turmoil.
Yes,
I don't like that we're equating it to that, even though that was my
I know, but it's a good metaphor. I don't necessarily. It's different impacts, but yes,
yeah.
similar theme.
So we're gonna go through. I made up a bunch of graphs explaining these. So we're going to talk about the most ranked songs. So in total, we had 75 ranks, 75 people put in songs. The most ranked song, the one that most people put in their top fives, is Champagne Problems. So that appeared anywhere in their top five. As long as it appeared in their top five, Champagne Problems was the one that we saw most frequently. Ivy was the second one, which I think is really interesting because Ivy is one of those that like you don't see on many people's like favorites. Like I don't think even if we look through the data, I don't think Ivy was anyone's number one.
I don't think so.
It
Let me.
wasn't. Oh, it was one of your friends' number one.
Okay.
Is one of your friends, but in general, you just don't see it very commonly being a number one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just everyone liked it enough to throw it somewhere on their top five.
Yeah.
Number three was a tie between Gold Rush and Tis the Damn Season, which makes both of these podcast posts very happy.
Yes.
Number 4 was a three-way tie between Happiness, Willow, and Cowboy Like Me. And number 5 was a four-way tie between Tolerate It, Nobody, No Crime, Long Story Short, and Closure. So again, those all of those songs in that order showed up more times on people's rankings than any other songs on the album.
And that's 11 songs still.
That's
So that's
11.
that's taking your top 5 and trying to squish 11 songs into that top 5.
It's it just shows like how hard it is to really rank these songs. Now to go into how frequently they appeared at certain slots. So the most people ranked their favorite song from the album, their number one song in the album, as Gold Rush.
As it should.
26.7 shut up. 26.7% of people said Gold Rush was their favorite song in the album. Their second favorite song in the album, the most common songs that showed up in this number 2 slot, was Ivy, Champagne Problems, and Tis the Damn Season, all tied at 20%. Ivy is shocking to me, but Champagne Problems and Tis the Damn Season seems par for the course. I
Hmm.
think those make sense. Number 3 was Cowboy Like Me, Willow, Champagne Problems again, and Gold Rush again, all tied at 13.3%. This one's really interesting. Number 4 slot was just straight up Ivy. Just most people put Ivy in their number 4 slot. I think that's really interesting.
Hmm.
And then number 5 is Closure and Champagne Problems again, tied at 20%. Champagne Problems was in 3 of these.
Yeah.
Champagne Problems showed up so many times in people's favorites. Interestingly enough, not as much in the number 1, but still like in number 2, 3, and 5 very frequently.
But that adds up. It was the most ranked song. It was the most chosen to be someone's somewhere in the top 5. So it holds some weight. And I mean, similarly to Folklore, we see a good amount of ties, three-way ties a couple times, two-way ties, which I guess is just a normal tie. Um, but funny enough, the only song that is not in anyone's top 5 is Womp Womp, It's Time to Go.
I can see that. I don't think that I don't think that like ruins It's Time to Go's quality. Like I think
Mhm.
It's Time to Go is a great song and it definitely grew on me the more I listened to it. It's just it has a lot of things going against it. It's a bonus track. So again, those people who aren't big Swifties, they had to wait 2 weeks or however long it was until she released the bonus tracks. And are they going to come back for that if they're not big into Taylor?
Mm,
Makes sense. And then it was also overshadowed by Right Where You Left Me, which is, I'm sorry, just the better bonus track.
yeah.
And like, don't get like again, it's not a bad song. It's Time to
Mhm.
Go still bops. I still like it. I still listen to it. But Right
Just
Where
the
You
crook
Left
who was
Me,
caught. Yeah, I know. Right where you left me, though, hits a lot different. But so
yeah.
that's our friends. Our friends, we surround ourselves with people who think similarly to us and who can complement our thoughts. So let's look at Reddit, who,
Mhm.
unbiased, just what were their opinion?
So every time a new Swift record comes out, Reddit, the Taylor Swift subreddit, does a huge survey with a lot of very interesting data. If you aren't on Reddit or you haven't looked it up or you're just interested in data like I am, definitely go check them out. It's actually I think they actually pin it in the top of the Reddit so you can see the Evermore and Folklore results from these surveys. But it is a lot of data. But we're going to focus on some top 5. So almost 2,500 people were surveyed this time, which is actually down from Folklore. I think last time they had like almost 5,000 people surveyed.
Hmm.
So interestingly enough, again, we're seeing that same drop off from Folklore to Evermore. People's number ones, people's favorite songs, top 5 is Nobody, No Crime. Number 2 is Willow. Number 3 is Champagne Problems. Number 4 is Gold Rush. And number 5 is Tis the Damn Season.
Too low.
That that lines up exactly how I would expect. If I had to pick what I thought the general population's favorite top 5 songs in this album would be, it would be those 5.
Yeah.
Nobody No Crime, just the generic bop that like is very digestible and easy for anyone to listen to. Willow, the single, very easy. Champagne Problems, just like a much beloved song with an incredible bridge. Gold Rush, much beloved. Tis the Damn Season, much beloved.
Hmm.
that makes so much sense to me. We could go into the most hated songs. So the number
They're
five
not
most hated,
unhated. That's a strong
they're
word.
that's a good point. The ones that people didn't like on first listen was number five is Dorothea, number four was Happiness, number three was Coney Island, number two was Cowboy Like Me, and big shock, number one is Closure.
That's actually not a big shock because for people who don't appreciate that genre, I mean, it's a lot of people are going to be turned away because it doesn't sound anything like what she's done before.
I can see that.
Mhm.
I'm in like a couple of different Taylor Swift Facebook groups, and like I just like kind of peruse and like see what people are talking about just to get like an idea. And Closure is probably one of the most divisive tracks from this album. I am very thankful that Devin got me to listen to Charlie XCX before this album dropped, and that I like actually was able to appreciate like a lot of the glitch pop that was in that, because I didn't like glitch pop at all before it, and I
Mhm.
might have fallen in the camp of not liking Closure. But
Yeah. And it's
it
really it's not even that glitch pop. It's just like
mm,
little tiny elements in it. So for
it's
people who
I
haven't heard it at all, it's a shock. It's like, whoa, what is this weird
uh,
like a weird time signature, weird kind of outburst moments.
the it's very it can be very distracting, which I can understand. The lyrics in the song, insane. Like we were texting last night listening to all of these songs, and we're just like sending each other lyrics that like we were just screaming. And I know Closure came on and I was screaming a couple at you.
Mhm.
That but like I said, I also see that with a lot of people. I see a lot of comments saying they love the lyrics, but they just can't get through the beat, the sounds, and like the production.
Mhm.
I can't fathom not liking this song. It like every part of it's really good, and I like that the beat like keeps your attention for me, but I can see it being jarring for some people. Cowboy Like Me, I definitely thought I was gonna hate on the first time I listened to it. It's just very slow. It very like there's not a lot of like upbeatness to it, which like generally equates to me not liking a song. But Jesus, if it doesn't grow on you like Ivy,
Mm.
and never leave. Like it really just shot up, and I really liked Cowboy Like Me a lot.
Yeah. Cowboy Like Me and Ivy are like pretty neck and neck for me for different reasons.
I can see that.
But just like I can't really like one's always just like slightly above the other and it like flip flops depending on the mood.
Which depending on which one you're listening to. Like if
Hmm.
you're listening to Cowboy Like Me, that's your favorite. If you're listening to Ivy, that's your favorite. Like
Yeah.
that's I think that's like basically the calling card to this whole album. Is just whatever song you're listening to is your favorite,
Hmm.
which is insane. Like that's such a brag. Coney Island, I think, is close to universally low on most people's radars. Some of our friends had it in their top five and really ranked it. I noticed a lot of those friends are really big fans of the National, which I think is
Hmm.
why that happened. Happiness, extremely, especially on this podcast, very divisive.
It's so good.
I think it's a great song, and I was texting Devin about it last night, and she was yelling at me. There are just some decisions in the song that I just don't like as much, and wish that she would have changed some things, but I understand why she did them.
Yeah, and you're
Uh
entitled to your wrong opinions.
yeah, that's yeah, all right.
Um Dor
Dorothea, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say Dorothea is a pretty common bottom song on a lot of
Hmm.
people's rankings, which I agree with. I think it sounds very, it's a nice little like easy listening to song, but there's nothing that makes it pop out at
Hmm.
you.
Yeah, like the only thing I can think of when I think of Dorothea is that Dorothea. Like I think
Hmm.
like that stands out, but like how much is that really gonna make a song stand out? Like you think of lyrics or the thing, or Closure's production. Like those are
Yep.
things that I'm gonna remember more than a scoop at the end of a name. So what do you think are on the results like of all the polls? Why do you think we found what we did?
I
What?
I think definitely with the Reddit one, it makes sense. I think when you get that large of a sample size group, that's really where you're gonna see the radio hits and the casual versus non-casual Taylor Swift fans and how that all comes down to boil. So I think this is a pretty accurate depiction on what it looks like. And then when you get into our friends and even our rankings, you see how they all really differ, except like a couple that are either pretty standard high or pretty standard low.
Hmm. So usually about here is where we would end this episode, but we have one quick thing to do afterward now. We have two eras here. Two eras. We we want to rank all 34 songs in the Folkmore era,
Folklore.
which I am amazed we have not called it Folkmore more. Like
Mhm.
that is such a great name. So we asked, in addition to asking all the top fives, we asked all our friends, we asked our followers on Instagram, everyone, as much as again, as many people who would could be bothered to answer us, which album they liked more. And if this wasn't the most razor thin margin
Mhm.
in the world, Devin, who won?
So, Evermore versus Folklore. Which one was appreciated more? More Folklore.
I hate you. I took me so long to figure out what you were doing. By
Folklore was
one
great
vote.
before. Yeah.
One vote.
I
Like
ran polls on my Instagram, on the podcast Instagram.
my
All of them
Instagram.
were just super close, like 50 something, 55 or 50 to like 50, like just so close. And some of them were different. Some of them had Folklore more, some of them had Evermore more.
It's so interesting. Like the percentage, 50.7% voted
Hmm.
for Folklore and
That's
49.3 for
crazy.
Evermore.
Hmm.
Like it's so funny because I like it because it just makes you know there's no wrong answer.
Hmm.
Like there it is just they are perfect sister albums because it's just impossible to really decipher between the two,
Yeah.
which I think is perfect. Like you can aspire to like it's how many times do you ask how good was this movie and then how good was the sequel and you get a 50% people voting for both?
Not
Like
too often.
if ever, like the only time I could think of that, and I've never seen it, like The Godfather Part 2 is supposed to be better than the first one,
Mm.
or at least on par, but it's just like very few sequels even live up to the first one, let alone are seen as equals to the
Well,
first one.
I am more of a Shrek 2 gal myself.
I hate you. I hate you so
It's
much.
such a better movie. I'm sorry, but yes. So, what do you think in terms of Folklore versus Evermore?
I easily prefer Evermore. Despite what Spotify says, I was looking through my Spotify today and I definitely listened to Folklore more than I did Evermore in like my all time. But also, I think Folklore was just out longer.
Hmm.
So that definitely contributes to it. But the main reason I think I prefer Evermore is just "'Tis the Damn Season." Like, obviously, I love this song more than life itself, but there just isn't a song that I like this much on Folklore. And like, don't get me wrong, Peace was my number one for a very long time, and I really, really love and appreciate Peace. But I did not have Peace on repeat day and night like I do with "'Tis the Damn Season." I like "'Tis the Damn Season" so much. It was somehow on statsforspotify.com my number one and number two most listened to song. I don't know how that happened, but yeah, like that's how much I liked the song and how much I listened to it so much. Like there are just times where like I would just put this song on repeat, forget that it's on, and just be singing constantly to it.
Hmm.
And hearing that riff, it just sends me to another planet. Just like like I can't get over how much I like that song, and I just don't have that with any song on Folklore. All
Hmm.
don't get me wrong, I'm not saying any of the songs on Folklore are bad. I'm just saying like they aren't to the quality that to me "'Tis the Damn Season" is. And I'm also not sick of it. Like I get sick of things so quickly. I'll
Hmm.
listen to a song on repeat until I hate it, and it usually takes about maybe a week at most for a really good song, and this is going on months now. One thing I will say, my friend mentioned this, and I think it really like made sense to me. But Folklore feels like a very teenage dream. Like it's a very obviously the problems are very teenagers because we're talking about kids in high school. It just feels very high school. And then
Hmm.
Evermore feels more like mid 20s, early 30s with champagne problems, with like breaking off an engagement, with a love that's been going on so long that you no longer like each other and you fall apart, with someone who you adore who just doesn't like you back. Like all of these, with murder, like all of these topics are just very much more mature topics than um the love triangle in high school that you see, or like things like along those lines.
Hmm.
And I think for me, someone who's in their mid 20s, it's just more relatable and they just hit home more than they do with folklore, and that just might be another reason why I gravitate towards it. If I was in high school right now, I can see gravitating towards folklore more.
Hmm. So for me, I struggled with this a lot, and I'm still changing my mind constantly. And folklore has such high standouts. Like
Mm-hmm.
the highs on folklore are high, but overall, I think that Evermore is just the better album, the better all-encompassing album. Because even if you look at our top 10, which we'll get into in a second, my top 10 is split evenly. 5 songs, both albums. Like that's how razor sharp the margins are for me. But when you get down into the meat of the album, I think that I just appreciate Evermore a little bit more than I do Folklore.
I think that's how I kind of feel too. Is like, yeah, the top songs on both albums are both amazing, but
Mhm.
when you get to like the songs that you don't consider the best songs, those songs on Evermore are better than those songs on Folklore.
Before we get into listing out our top 10 songs, I just want to point out a really interesting point. So, your top song is from Evermore, my
Hmm.
top song is from Folklore, and
Yep.
then immediately our second song flops. It goes to
Yep.
the other album.
I do love. Actually, it does that 3 times. You literally candy caned it.
Flip, flop, flip, flop, flip, flop, flip, flop, 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 flop.
Mine. I have one Folklore in my top 5.
Hmm.
It's very interesting, and also just like I noticed my rankings for Folklore just changed dramatically the quote unquote definitive rankings we did
Yeah,
months ago. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna give you our top 10 from the Folklore era. Don't worry if you want to see all 34. We just don't want to read out 64 rankings to you guys. That doesn't sound like good quality content. If you would like to see the entirety of our rankings, we're going to post them on our social media. They should probably be active now by the time this episode is up and you guys are listening to it. So definitely go check out and make sure to tell us why we're wrong.
probably. So,
um,
you go
Tell me your top
first.
10.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
you want
I'll
me
go
to go
first.
first? No, you go first. You go
Okay, I'll go
first.
first. So I'm gonna do album and then title of the song. So my number one song was from Folklore. It's August. I am an August head
Yeah.
through and through, like Jack Antonoff says. And in true August head fashion, my number two song from Evermore is Gold Rush. Makes
You
sense.
just you just like gravitated towards the Jack in
I
these
know.
albums.
Then we get to number three, off of Folklore, again flip flopping, is My Tears Ricochet. Still cannot get over that song. Then my number four,
You sent me so long of you just singing along to that song. Like you sent me such a long snap. I was like, "Oh, it's over." Nope. It's just
nope, keeps
kept
going.
going.
My number four song, flipping back to Evermore, Tis the Damn Season. Number five, flipping back to Folklore, Peace. Number six, flipping back to Evermore, Happiness. Then we get for the first time, flipping back to Folklore, Illicit Affairs at 6 or 7, and then Cardigan at number 8. And then flopping back over to Evermore for the last two is Long Story Short and Right Where You Left Me. That is my top 10.
I love that your 9 and 10 are both Speak Now songs. That's really interesting to me. Uh yeah, like I think it's so fascinating. You really stuck to your guns on Folklore because
Hmm.
a lot of your songs on Folklore are match what you said in your last one. I really sold out in my opinions on Folklore. No, number one being, so my number one, of course, 'Tis the Damn Season. Like I said, I have not stopped talking about it since it came out. I will wear a sandwich board and walk around on the side of the road telling people to listen to this song. So my number one is "Tis the Damn Season" from Evermore. My number two does flip to Folklore, but it's not Peace, which was my number one for a very long time. And I'm actually just going to listen to Spotify and say and just admit it, even though I don't want to. But the one is my favorite song from Folklore.
which
It's
is
just so
crazy.
it's so good. It's such a bop. I always feel great listening to it. Like it just hits every time. And I'm tired of pretending like it doesn't. Like it's so hard. Like I hate going with the mainstream, but sometimes the mainstream is just right and the one is just a phenomenal song. My number 3 from we're going back to a long list of Evermore is Champagne Problems, which literally last night at 1 a.m. I decided, yeah, no, this song is just too good not to put up higher. Like Champagne Problems fluctuated a lot for me, getting as low as like I think 10
Mm.
in my rankings, and now it's hard to put it past. Like the lyrics, the bridge, the content of the song is just so good. The only gripe I have is the way she says champagne prop. Like that's the only gripe I have on the song. Everything else is phenomenal. Then we go to Cowboy Like Me on Evermore. Like I said, I've been talking about that uh all episode. Number 5, Right Where You Left Me on Evermore. I just love this song so much. I love the Speak Now vibes. Taylor, if you could tweet out 3 purple hearts, I'd be really excited. Just please do that for me. Number 6 is actually Gold Rush. It dropped a lot. Gold Rush was pretty consistent in being my number 2 song on this album for a while, but like I don't know. I mean, it does the same thing I guess August did, where it's just I don't understand it in the way that you do.
Mm.
So it just flopped a little bit for me. We go back to Folklore for a couple here. We go to Cardigan and August for 7 and 8 respectively. Again, these are just like the popular songs. Cardigan, like I'll tell you exactly why I put Cardigan so high, because I was listening to Cardigan the other day, but I was like doing that thing we mentioned in the last episode where we're listening to it but we're not really paying attention, and then the Leaving Like a Father just cut through everything I was doing, and I just stopped and looked and I was just like just like started to cry. Like yeah, so Cardigan had to go higher for me, and it is the single. I hate going with the mainstream because I'm such a hipster, but yeah, Cardigan is just really great. August, we talked a lot about August. It's impossible not to love it. And then my rounding it out is 2 more Evermore songs, Closure and Long Story Short. I have, of course, I have to have another Speak Now song in Long Story Short, and Closure just it's just so unique. The lyrics really hit home. And we were talking about Closure a little bit the other day, how like we have mentioned multiple theories about this song and all of them seem viable, and that's insane to me.
So I just want to point out, without listing the other 30 something songs in our rankings, first off, your top 10 only has 3 songs from Folklore.
Yep.
That's so interesting to me. So that really shows that you like Evermore a lot more. But then when we look at my rankings past number 10, so starting with number 9, we have this long list of just one, two, three, four, five, six, 7 Evermore songs broken up, then 2 Folklore, 4 Evermore, and then you get most of Folklore back in. So it's pretty much split from my top 10, and then
Wow.
instantly Evermore, a couple Folklore that I really like, then Folklore, and then the couple Evermore that I don't like.
And then
Meanwhile,
Coney Island.
yours, and then Coney Island, and then yours is pretty Evermore heavy at the beginning, and then you have like you just do groupings. Like you have
Yeah.
4 songs from Folklore, little interjection of Evermore, back and forth for a little bit, and then good amount of Evermore, good amount of Folklore, Evermore, Folklore. It's just like you
Yeah.
really group them together, which I find so interesting. Like,
It's funny too because like we were talking about it last night. Like Peace is like on 13 for me, which was like my number one de facto best song, but it's Under the Lakes now for
mm,
me. Like it's just like the my appreciation for different songs on Folklore have drastically changed since listening to Evermore. And yeah, like it is really interesting to point out. Like I love how clean yours is. It's just very much clearly Evermore at the top, Folklore at the bottom.
Well, it's so interesting because I feel like we flip flop in terms
Hmm.
of, so my top 10 is very indecisive and then the rest of it is very decisive. Yours, I feel like, is very decisive at the top, and then yours is indecisive at the bottom for groupings.
It for me, like, it's interesting. So the first 10% of ours, I'm very Evermore. You're
Hmm.
very mixed
Hmm.
color. For the next 10, I'm decisively Folklore, and you are decisively Evermore. And then the bottom 10, I'm more mixed. Like, let me
Hmm.
see. The bottom, I it's still more Folklore than Evermore, but
That's
enough.
so interesting.
Yeah, I love this data. I love reading this. Um so that is our rankings. Like I said, we'll put the full 34 for each of us. Our Instagram this week, we're gonna post our final rankings for Evermore, just Evermore, our full rankings for Evermore and Folklore. If you guys have opinions on that, if you guys have, are we wrong in our top 10? Do you think that we really sold out and changed our favorite songs? What are your favorite songs? uh, please be sure to let us know. If you like what you heard in this episode, please be sure to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. A 5-star rating and a written review really helps us grow this podcast and continue to gather more listeners.
Yeah, and
If
make
you
sure
have
to,
a friend
oh,
if you have a friend that really likes Taylor Swift, be sure to tell them about us and have them come over and listen as well.
and make sure to follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to see our faces when we talk about this. We are at We Need to Calm Down podcast on pretty much everything. And if you go to our YouTube, make sure to subscribe. We passed 100 subscribers a little bit ago, and we're just trying to keep that train a chugging.
If you guys have a suggestion for an episode, be sure to drop us a comment or a DM. We love hearing from you guys, and a lot of those episodes get made. We have a large bank that we're looking to get through of episodes that you guys recommended. So thank you guys for sending those in.
And then aside from that, thank you so much for listening to the We Need to Calm Down podcast. We will see you on March 16th at every other typical Tuesday at the moment.
Until then, come back.
We'll be here.